What's up, dudes? Max here, and we haven't done one of these in a while, but welcome back to another episode of Real Talk. Now, the topic of today's video, you're going to agree with or very much disagree. I think it might be a little controversial, especially considering the fact that a lot of people on this channel look forward to my coverage of Capcom games, especially because they were the creators of so many favorite fighting games that I grew up with, as well as a lot of them nowadays. However, I do want to specifically talk about Street Fighter V because a lot of people are expecting coverage of me for specific reasons and characters and things along that nature, and after a year, it's been a year and a few months now that the game has been out, I kind of wanted to talk about my personal opinions about the game, where it's at, where I think the game can be commended, and where I think it ultimately fails in kind of keeping my interest. Now, let's preface this with something very important that I need to talk about, because if you're out there and you're playing Street Fighter V right now, and you go online and you go to ranked and you go to tournaments and things like that, and you absolutely enjoy the game and you don't see any major issues with it, I do see where you're coming from. There are aspects of Street Fighter V that I personally enjoy that kind of boil down to being a player of the game and not as much a viewer, specifically things like combos. It's kind of nice to be able to jump in and do some really good damaging combos with characters and then figure them out within almost 30 minutes if you have experience from previous Capcom games. Combos are easier in this game compared to any other Street Fighter title. I also find certain characters to be very fun to play, like Alex, although he is kind of frustrating at times as he's kind of gone through this weird mishwash of rebalancing and changing and going from being okay to kind of not okay to them bringing him back. It's been a little odd, but if there's one character I can wholeheartedly stand by that if there's any time I have an opportunity to play Street Fighter V, it's Akuma, because I absolutely love what they did to Akuma's gameplay in this game. He is simply the most fun version of Akuma in any Street Fighter game, regardless of how good he is on the tier list. He's just extremely fun to play, in my opinion. However, with the game in its current state 1 year and a few months later, there is issues about the game that I was making mention of on the first day I played it at E3 2015. My initial mention was that the mechanics of the game don't seem to allow the player a lot of creativity. The first thing I noticed after examining the initial mechanics of the game while I was first playing it was that, wow, you get a V-trigger and a V-skill, and the V-trigger is kind of uninspired, like it gives Ryu slightly more powerful and faster fireballs. It makes Ken's feet light on fire and some moves slightly change, while other characters get pretty awesome ones that totally change their appearance like Nikali, but ultimately just really changes frame data and modifies the looks of one of the supers. In my opinion, Nikali's actually got one of the best V-triggers in the game because it modifies a lot of what the character does. But a lot of things like V-skill and V-trigger for some other characters is very passive, and it felt like they were aggressively trying not to break things. Bringing myself completely back to my initial thoughts after playing the game on the first couple days it was available at E3 many years ago, I feel this game was playing it way too safe. And that's kind of being felt nowadays, an echoing of the community and people complaining about Street Fighter V while other people are supporting it. It does seem like you see a lot of the exact same things with characters, like one character or one player that might be only so good with a certain character executes things the exact same way another player does, but the professionalism, the personality of the player being executed on screen mostly comes down to things like conditioning. You have to condition your opponent to block a certain way, and that's where a lot of the big skill sets in Street Fighter V come in, knowing what your opponent's going to do, how well you know the matchups, and how well you know the opposition. It's a lot of mental conditioning at that point, which is not very spectacular to look at because it's a lot of underneath stuff that's happening and not as much surface level, which can be a little hard to convey in a fighting game form. My other initial thoughts after first playing the game were expecting more V-skills and V-triggers per character, and I would have figured by this time where the official second season of the game is out, that the actual adjustments made to the game would have been similar to something like Super Street Fighter IV to the original vanilla Street Fighter IV. We got more supers, there was heavy readjustments to characters, and there were a whole bunch of new characters added. We are in this season thing where new characters are being added right now. However, I was very much expecting at least multiple supers. I wanted to see new animations per character. I wanted to see multiple utilities added per super per character and give us a reason to switch V-skills and V-triggers. I felt that that's always been something I've really wanted to be in the game, and it just hasn't happened yet, which is very weird considering this is the technical second season that the game is being updated. And the last thing, which is a very, very, very critical part of something why I like specific fighting games, is its visual design. How cool are the characters that I am playing in the game look, and is the stuff that they're doing cool enough to inspire me to play them even more? The one character, like I said before, Akuma, has definitely bridged that gap for me with a character in SF5, and I really love the way Akuma looks and how he executes things, and he's got one of the best looking raging demons ever. He really makes me want to play the game even more, but a lot of the other characters and just the way everything looks in SF5 looks so similar to Street Fighter 4, just a bit less interesting. I keep mentioning to people that if you have not played a lot of Street Fighter 4, or you played a bit of it and you didn't play a whole bunch, and then you're jumping into Street Fighter 5, and you were about to purchase the game outside of the reasons of its lack of content and everything, to a completely casual player, these games from about 10 feet away can look really similar. Like the color schemes, the way the characters are proportioned, the way the combat is actually taking place. We all know there was drastically changing mechanics with focus attacks and V-triggers and things being very different between the two titles, but to a casual perspective, there might not have been a great reason to buy Street Fighter V just because it's visually very similar to Street Fighter 4, and I wasn't a huge fan of the way Street Fighter 4 looked either. But to sum everything up in this end, talking about the critical things, there are aspects I really like about Street Fighter V, like I said, Akuma, and I like similar aspects of Street Fighter 4, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the mechanics of that game. Characters like Evil Ryu and Oni will always bring me back to playing those games because they are the craziest, wackiest hybrid Shotos, and they felt extended in SF5 with what they did with Akuma. I like them changing the way a Shotokan character plays because it's the basis of Street Fighter that kind of revolved around the Ryu archetype character, and man, when they go nuts with it, you get characters like Akuma in SF5, Oni and Evil Ryu in Street Fighter 4. They're very fun to play, and they look absolutely awesome. Now here, with all that being said, I really wanted to focus on what the game succeeds in and what it failed in, and what it ultimately failed in was just raw sales. The game was unable to captivate a casual audience due to very bad word of mouth despite pretty good critical reviews. Once it was out that there was no basic arcade mode, which the game is missing, and the story mode wasn't going to be coming for months later, there was a lot that was not there for people that really don't like just jumping online. I feel that there was a huge misjudgment of the amount of people that just like throwing in a fighting game, playing a few matches in an arcade mode, and that's about all they really want to do, instead of using it as their tool to beat someone's ass. They more think of it just as a video game that they want to play, and I know a lot of people have a hard time dismembering that in their brain. You have to think from the perspective of someone who is not a competitive player and just treats fighting games as video games, and that's exactly what was misjudged with this game's inherent launch. Now, there has been plenty of other things that have been added to try to bring in the casual audience, but the word of mouth was already set, and the game only sold 100,000 copies in about a year after its initial sales push, pushing it to about 1.5 million sales from what I understand, and the game was projected to sell 2 million. So it was a complete quarter of the way just from hitting its sales goals. But the crazier thing ties back to a video I made a year ago talking about where I feel Street Fighter V can be successful. I got a lot of flack on that video saying that this game could be successful in any way. People actually thinking I was defending the game when I was just pointing out raw facts about Street Fighter V, not really defending it or otherwise, because I've always been pretty critical of SF5 straight from the first moment I played it at E3, like I said. But in that video, the conclusion was that the only way this game could possibly reach the success they're looking for is through esports, and within a year, they have done it. Somehow, I can give Capcom USA, which are the guys that are pretty much running Street Fighter V, and its big competitive environment, these guys have done an amazing job because they took what was a giant garbage fire disaster of a launch for a huge AAA fighting game that was Street Fighter, the biggest fighting game property on the planet, and they took its horrible sales and were able to modify it to focus more around the competitive audience. Sure, this led to issues where DLC is way overpriced and things like that, and it might not be something that you, me, or any other person that's really looking to Street Fighter V from the outside would make any sense, but to the competitive audience, they like it. They actually really enjoy it. They eat this content up. They go to the events, and somehow Capcom has found a way to make the game successful, even for it to continue its development to 2020, which the lead producers have recently said that they're ready to do. And even though many people commemorate Street Fighter V and its mechanics, and the big thing that's missing from the game is like the content, the single player content, which isn't things that I'm super thrilled about, The stuff that I've always found really frustrating with SF5 has been the mechanics. The game overall just feels very weird to play in its more weighted approach to the way characters move and jump, as well as the way certain moves and attacks connect. There's a very specific beat timing to how medium to medium connects with the majority of characters, and the way the combo structure feels in the game that is just much more slow and weighted compared to any other Street Fighter game before, and it's always just personally felt really weird to me. But of course, those first few beta months were absolutely awesome with the game. Figuring out a huge variety of combos with the characters was one of the most fun aspects of it, but then we got to the point where each new beta that came out removed those things that were really fun with the characters, all the way through several different iterations till we got to launch, hoping that some of them would come back, and they ultimately didn't. By that time, we were already kind of playing Street Fighter V before its launch for about 6 months or so, and played a whole bunch of characters, and even by the time it came out and the characters were somewhat hollowed, more esports focused, saved for balancing, and very safe versions of themselves, I kind of lost interest in Street Fighter V at that point. Sure, I have fun playing it just as much as any other fighting game because the netcode runs okay sometimes, but man, the infrastructure and the online network has been very rough, which is why I'm extremely glad they're tackling it now, hopefully for future fighting games to make things work a lot better. It's just kind of frustrating that even after a year of the game being out, you still don't get points for a ranked match after server maintenance is over, so I just really wish that stuff would eventually be fixed, which ultimately leads me to not really playing a lot of the game. Many people still assume to me as being the Street Fighter V guy on YouTube, which I absolutely appreciate, because there was a very specific point back in 2015 where I really enjoyed the discovery and figuring things out with this game, but once things were kind of figured out, it got much less interesting after the launch of the game and the subsequent months after that. I was excited for Alex, I was very excited for Akuma because of the change of the way characters would play, and I did find them to be very fun, but the act of jumping back in, especially after I hit Platinum with like Ken and spent 5 days playing, it wasn't really there. The motivation was kind of lost, and I played a lot of other fighting games, and I would like to tell you guys that if you're just playing Street Fighter V, there is kind of like a fighting game renaissance out there happening right now, between several other games that are going to be dropping this year. Of course, we all know of Marvel Infinite, Injustice 2, Guilty Gear Rev 2, also to accompany with Tekken 7. There's going to be many options out there for a variety of players, and there's even the older games that run great online as well. All I'm saying is that if you have a lot of frustrations with Street Fighter V and you only really can play this game, I heavily encourage you just to try some other ones. SF5 will continually be updated. The developers are ready to update the game for many years, like they said, and the competitive community is absolutely supporting it, which is great. I did not want to see Street Fighter V bankrupt Capcom as a company. What I wanted the game was to set an example for future fighting games, that whatever they did with this game and its launch and the way it was all treated was absolutely unacceptable and really can't happen again. Of course, they would prefer there to be more sales. Of course, they would prefer more raw money in the pocket, but somehow at the end of all of that, when it didn't do all the sales goals, they really were able to make it a competitive esport game, and now it's on TV, and a bunch of people tune into the Capcom Pro Tour just to watch Street Fighter V, and I think that's really exciting. It's not something I'm very interested in watching just because I don't really enjoy watching Street Fighter V. The last time I even kept up the game competitively was back at EVO 2016. But there's a lot of people that do, and I don't think that's a bad thing, and you really can't be mad at them for that. All I'm trying to say is that if it's your only avenue of checking out fighting games, there's a lot of other really cool stuff out there right now. I will say, in the future, there is something that can absolutely get me more interested to play this game. The return of some classic characters that have not been in a lot of Street Fighter games over the past many years would be very welcome. Like I've said before, returning characters like Sagat and Sakura would make me very excited, and if I was to be really excited about other characters, man, Sean and Q would absolutely do it. Because over the past 6 months, I've kind of played a character the first day or two after they've come out, and that's about all I would touch it. So I would put about maybe 6 to 7 hours into Street Fighter V once every 3 to 4 months, and that's about all I've played of the game for a very long time. Characters like that would absolutely bring me back to playing the game because I feel that characters are what really inspire people to jump back and play it, but a bunch of other things, like I said, new V skills, new V triggers for characters would be great. I think that's something that absolutely the game needs, and I think a lot of people would be very excited, and I did mention about a year ago that making the game a completely different relaunched package like Super Street Fighter V would be very smart, but A lot of people didn't agree with me a year ago, even though people are kind of mentioning that now. So who knows? It feels like Capcom is sticking with their tried and true plan that the game needs to stay as an all-in-one package that you just purchase, and then it gets updated from that point forward. The biggest takeaway from this video is that this was all an absolutely huge lesson learned. Capcom is working on the Capcom Fighters Network, the entire basis that the online infrastructure works for Street Fighter V, because there's about to be another gigantic AAA Capcom fighting game that's just on the horizon, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. And this one, I have a firm belief that even after the nearly 5 months it's been since the game's announcement, and we have heard almost no information or news about anything Marvel Infinite related in that time frame, it's kind of speaking to me that they do not want to mess up like they did with Street Fighter V, which was an example that was set to a lot of the people that would not play the game competitively, and Marvel Infinite needs to be the game that's going to draw everyone back because they have to get everyone's faith back. They have to convince everyone that there is a worthy purchase here, worthy enough of a full price game, unlike what Street Fighter V was at launch. And that's the end of it. Really, I'm excited for Marvel Infinite, and I'm kind of happy that they're not talking a lot about it. I know there's going to be future DLC characters dropping within the next month or two for SF5, but really, we got 3 other gigantic fighting games that I'm really looking forward to playing that are going to be also coming out of the next month, and the amount of time I have to dedicate to each one is going to be ridiculous. So all I'm saying is that if the character in SF5 isn't some dramatically crazy, interesting, and awesome-looking character, I'm probably just going to pass it up this time for something else that is coming out right around that time frame, and I might like putting a bit more time into. Either way, let me know your guys' current thoughts on Street Fighter V. I'm sorry this video went a little long, but I just wanted to clear the air as many people are expecting a lot from me for a lot of different fighting games, and Capcom games are a huge part of that, but I feel like over the past few characters that have come out, especially with like Colleen and some of the ones before that, I was mostly making those week ofs and those videos for the people that really wanted to see it, just because I want to make everyone on the channel happy. Either way, like I said, there's a lot to look forward to that's going to be coming out in the near future, and I just hope I'll get the time to play all of it. As always, dudes, thank you a ton for watching. My name is Max, and I'll see you next time.